You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 635, where it's been a year, well, just over a year, since the end of Skeleton Crew. And a tradition here on the show is to do a 1 year later show. And so here we are. We're going to talk about Skeleton Crew, talk about our thoughts and opinions, having rewatched it just recently. And to be honest, I'll just tell you right now, I hadn't watched it in quite some time. There's been some other stuff going on. So it was kind of refreshing to actually watch it, but more on that in a second. And kind of chime in on some things. Like we traditionally will talk about whether or not we feel like the series is held up, what spawned from this series, you know, what does the future look like for the series? And some of those questions are up in the air. And a lot of it is because we just don't know the future of where Star Wars is going, at least in this era. But more on that in just a second. And to help me kind of break this down and do this 1 year later review is Chris. Chris, welcome to the show, sir. How's it going, man?
Going well. I'm happy to be here and talk about Skeleton Crew.
It's a good show.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, so before we get into that, let's I want to jump into some thank yous first off. So I want to say thank you to all of our Patreon members, especially our now part of the tribe members. And that's Alex, Danny, Dante, Daz. I've got a Brad feeling, Jackson, Jacob, Josh, Mike Borda, Rita Reborn, Sharkman Dan, and Uncle Leon. And then our Delusions of Grandeur tier, which is our highest tier. That is now This Is Rod Racing, Steve, and Rob. Thank you guys so much. If you're interested in Patreon, you can scan the QR code here in the corner. That'll take you there. And as little as $2 all the way up to 20, depending on what you want. But there's a ton of stuff back there in the back catalog for you to listen to and watch, depending on the tier that you sign up for. So we just did a Patreon show a couple days ago, and that was a lot of fun to talk about. So there's plenty of stuff, like I said, that's in there right now. I do want to also plug the YouTube memberships. So we have YouTube memberships. It's like $1 if you want to sign up. You get some stickers and that sort of thing. So you can do that as well. And then as far as the programming notes, Low Red Moon, the book by Mike Chen, is out. This is the Star Wars Outlaws book. It is, again, written by Mike Chen. And Lauren did her teaser a few weeks ago. She has her full video out. It released yesterday. It's, I want to say it's like 15 minutes longish, somewhere around there, but it's a longer video. But she does get into all the weeds and spoilers. And so if you're looking for an overview of that book, or you're not going to get a chance to read it and just kind of want to know what's going on, or maybe whether or not that book is for you. Maybe you played the game, maybe you didn't. That's a great video to watch. And remember, Lauren didn't play the game, so she's kind of going in this with a fresh pair of eyes and really focusing on the story elements rather than, hey, this was in the game, or this wasn't in the game, or these characters were or were not in the game, that sort of thing. So great review. Please take a look at that video. And this Sunday, we are coming back to do part 2 of our Patreon show. So I just mentioned the first Patreon show that we did last couple days ago, Sunday night. That was the prequels and sequels, the final hype. And what we were doing is talking about all of the hype that went into the prequel era. And it dawned on us as we were doing the show notes that there was a lot of material. There was a lot of things we really wanted to talk about. So we ended up breaking those 2 shows up. And so we've got part 1 that came out on Sunday. We talked exclusively about the prequels. And then this Sunday, we've got part 2 where we're going to talk about the sequels. And so same kind of content. We'll talk about, what the fandom was like, the landscape of Star Wars. And at the very end, I'd like to just kind of compare the 2 and say, which one had the biggest hype? Which one were we most excited about? Your mileage may vary, but I'm pretty sure I know where Chris and I are going to land on that one. So that's coming up Sunday night at 9 p.m. Central. So join us for that if you're a Patreon member. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so before we get into the main topic, Chris, I know we had a little bit of news yesterday. Sometimes Star Wars news kind of trickles in, and sometimes it's worthy of bringing up into the main show. Sometimes it's not. But this is kind of a big deal. So we got the announcement that Josh D'Amaro has been named the new CEO, replacing Bob Iger. And we got some information, some timelines on that. And we'll get into all that here in just a second. But for you, I know you follow this really closely. I'm not sure if you have your own opinions on Josh D'Amaro. He was kind of alien to me. He wasn't on my radar, not somebody that I was familiar with. I've done a lot of research and read up about him since then. I think you and I have seen some interviews about him. But I guess, what are your thoughts about this, knowing that Bob Iger is now leaving for the second time, but after a tenure of like 20 years as the CEO of Disney? What do you think about Josh and maybe even the future of where things are going to go with him in at the head?
So I think Josh D'Amaro was a logical choice. The one thing that I know will thrive under him is the parks. I believe he has a genuine love for the parks. I actually was able to meet him. Well, run into him and shake his hand after I rode Rise of the Resistance. The first day it was open to the public down in Hollywood Studios.
Oh, was he there?
Actually, yeah, he was out there at the end of the ride.
Yeah.
Talking to folks, asking them what he thought or what they thought of Rise of the Resistance.
Right.
I think I was only able to get like maybe a word or two out because one, I was super emotional after riding the first time.
Yeah.
And, he kind of approached me thinking that I didn't know who he was. And I sure as hell knew who he was. So I went ahead and shook his hand, but I was like, oh, I loved it. And then I kind of walked off.
Yeah.
But
right.
I've seen him. I saw him at D23 a few years ago presenting on the future of the Disney parks. I've seen several videos of him promoting the parks. I've talked to some Imagineers. The big one that was behind like Galaxy's Edge and the Galactic Star Cruiser, Scott Trowbridge, say great things about him. So I have confidence that he will treat the parks and also treat the legacy Disney characters the way that they need to be treated. Now, for other IPs that Disney own, obviously he doesn't have that much experience with those IPs. And also he doesn't have too much experience with Disney's other properties like Disney Plus, like Walt Disney Pictures and whatnot. So that is going to be the big question: is how is he going to handle that? I'll let you give your thoughts on it as well. But of course, there's also a flip side to this coin that I'm sure we'll talk about.
And just to kind of keep the date straight here. So Iger will leave, I guess, the board. What is it? Around March 18th, I think, is when he actually leaves the board, and then he'll stay in as a consultant or advisor, if you will, all the way through the end of the year,
right.
Maybe sooner if things go well, but it's kind of really up to him as far as when he wants to bow out. As far as D'Amaro goes, like from what I was able to gather, and I posted this on the day of because I just went and read a couple of glimpses of stuff that he had done. As I was reading that, I started thinking, I don't see a lot of stuff in here about Disney Plus or movies, Marvel, Star Wars, right? And so that gave me a little bit of pause because I'm thinking that's, selfishly as a Star Wars fan, I love the rides and I love the parks, but really where we kind of had this like open space, this unknown territory of where the future is going to go has really been in that sphere of television and movies. And for us Star Wars fans, probably movies more than anything else, right? That's what drives us. That's what we live for. That's the big ball for Star Wars, is going to the movies and not knowing that knowing that he doesn't have a huge background in that. Or from the creative side of things, it kind of left a little gap for me. Now, I say that the day after that, they did announce that Dana Walden was coming in. She's the newly appointed president and chief creative officer. So similar to the way I'm picturing this, and I could be completely wrong, but the way I'm looking at this is it's similar to what Lucasfilm did, right? They got Filoni doing the creative side, and they've got what's her name? Brennan doing doing all of the business stuff. It sounds like what they're doing here is that we saw an interview yesterday that was posted later in the day. ABC News had an exclusive. Why wouldn't they? ABC News had an exclusive with Bob Iger and D'Amaro. They were both kind of sitting down. There really wasn't anything new that you got from like the article, the press releases, but it was interesting to see the way, how they interacted and them talking with each other. And it does sound, again, like he is really going to be leaning on Dana Walden as kind of being that creative person. So her background, I don't know a lot about either. I couldn't find a whole lot publicly, but it does sound like they're trying to address that at least by bringing in someone else and saying, look, you're not a Bob Iger. You can't take on everything. And therefore they're kind of splitting up duties there. So I see that, but I don't know. I still have a funny feeling about where Disney Plus is going to go, where streaming is going to go in general. And then the biggest gap for me that I'd love to hear more about and see more about in the coming months and a couple of years maybe is the movies themselves. And what does that look like? Is he going to allow Dave Filoni to just say, you know what, here are the movies and not rubber stamp him, but not be the Bob Iger where he's checking him, right? Body checking him and saying, no, we can't do that.
Right.
We're not going to do that.
Exactly.
That might be more of what I'm thinking happens. I'm hoping that happens. And I think that same thing applies to the Marvel side of things. I mean, you got Kevin Feige, who I think just a couple of days ago said he's planning to renegotiate his deal. He's in for the long run. He doesn't want to leave. You've got him driving that creative helm as well. And so far, they've kind of given, I wouldn't say they give him a free pass on just about everything, but they put out a lot of content and haven't had a lot of, checks, I guess. Right. So I'm hoping that's the formula, hoping that's where it goes. At the same time, I'd rather have quality over quantity, but interesting. But those are my thoughts. So what do you think about DeMauro and television, and then certainly Dana Walden coming in? Do you think that's going to be a good thing? And how much do you know about her background and experience?
So I don't know too much about her background. I do know that she did have she did work from an executive capacity for television in the Walt Disney Company. I don't know the extent, but for us who love Star Wars, I think she is going to be our target person, because ultimately I think that she is going to be the one that will be, give the green light for Lucasfilm to, kick off certain media projects. When I mean by media, I mean movies and Disney Plus TV shows. So I think she's going to be the target person. And I believe that DeMauro will trust her enough to say, okay, if you believe this will be a success, go ahead and rubber stamp it. So ultimately, she's going to be the one that I think will help shape the future of Star Wars, because she's going to be the one to say, yes, I approve these projects moving forward. I don't think because the way Disney operates, and I believe all Disney executives probably have this in them, that they're just going to give, Filoni and Brennan a blank check and say, hey, any project that you believe needs to get off the ground, you have my blessing. I do believe she will check it. I think Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm properties, they're a little bit different than Marvel. I think because of the scrutiny behind them, there's a lot more scrutiny behind the Lucasfilm projects than Marvel projects. So I think that's why Disney kind of handles them with white gloves. But I do believe, hopefully she'll have faith. I do believe she'll have faith in the executive team or the leadership team coming out of Lucasfilm with Filoni and Brennan, and trust Filoni saying, hey, I believe this project will work. Say, okay, I believe in you. Here's your rubber stamp. Go get it done. And essentially from her aspect, make it good, but also make us some money. You know what I mean? So I think that's, like I said, I'm not sure where she's going to come from, but she's going to be for Star Wars fans of Lucasfilm properties. She's going to be the one we're going to probably keep an eye on. Not so much DeMauro, but he's the CEO. So he's the one in charge ultimately. But I think she's going to be our point person to determine the future of Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree. And the rubber stamping or the unchecking, I guess, if you will, is only going to go so far if, things don't go well.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like initially everybody's going to be like, hey, I trust you until they don't. And I suspect things will change, because at the end of the day, and we've said this so many times on the show, Disney is a business and they do have shareholders. And a lot of the decisions, unfortunately, right or wrong, that we see come out of Disney are because of the shareholders and the impact it can have on the shares and the stock and the financial sustainability of the company. So I totally understand that. We totally get it. It's unfortunate because it's his business, right? But so some of that, it may get checked because of those things as well. But we'll see. It's exciting. I mean, we talked about this in what's coming in 2026 is this would be the year that we got the replacement for Bob Iger, and now we got it, and let's see how it goes. Yeah. So, all right.
And hopefully we won't have a repeat of the Bob Chapek era.
Bob Chapek. Yeah. Yeah. Huge popular fella around these circles.
Oh yeah.
All right. I'm just kidding. Okay. Let's get into our main show. Let's talk about Skeleton Crew 1 year later. So let me do the by the numbers piece of it, and then we'll get into some discussion here. Episode 1, This Could Be a Real Adventure, aired on December 2nd, 2024. It ended with The Real Good Guys on January 14th, 2025. So that was, again, we're just a little bit over on the 1 year aspect of it all. But I want to talk just quickly on the viewership, because this is something that got a lot of traction, or got a lot of people talking about as numbers were getting released right after Skeleton Crew. And specifically, it was really around, I mean, it's not hard to compare them to all the other Star Wars television shows that we've got out there that have come out before. But I think in general, and here's the caveat with these numbers, okay? And again, if you're new to the show, this may be the first time you've heard it from us, but it's something we've talked about many, many times on the show before. There isn't a one true source like that you can go to try to understand how well a show is or is not doing. What you have to do with streaming services is kind of follow the trends, right? You've got a lot of different systems out there. There are a lot of different ways that they capture these numbers, they capture these figures. Almost every single one of them has caveats. Every single one of them has flaws and inaccuracies. And at the end of the day, the only people that would truly know what those numbers look like are the companies themselves. Well, they don't have any responsibility or reason to release those numbers. And so like Disney and Fox and, Hulu and those guys, we never see that. I mean, you'll see it when they're, pounding their chest and they really want to make a statement. You'll see the numbers there. But if things aren't going really well, or they want to keep it close to their heart, they're not obligated to release these numbers. And so what we got again is just kind of a lot of different sources. And when you aggregate those or you look at the trends, that's going to be your best guess, best feel for how something is going. With Skeleton Crew, it was an interesting series from a viewership perspective. I know when it first launched, and the data shows this, at least again, the data that we have, and most of the data that I have is from Just Watch, and I forgot the other one already, but there's another one too. But Nielsen's got some ratings out there as well. But I think what you were seeing for like the trend was it didn't really get off to a good start. Like it had the lowest viewership for like a first opening of, almost, I think any Star Wars show. The only one that was even worse than like Acolyte, which, it was, I didn't hate it. I loved it, but it was very controversial and you had a lot of people going against it. Right. But yet the viewership for this one, even with like Watts and Ford behind it and being called Goonies in space and all the excitement and all that, it didn't get off to a good start. And we can talk about maybe the whys there, but then what you saw is the viewership did continue to grow, not significantly, not hugely. It wasn't like a Andor where it suddenly skyrocketed and became, hit the top 10 in Nielsen ratings, but it did grow because as time went on, people started talking about it and it did get better in my opinion. I felt like, well, we'll get to that in a second, but I did feel like it was a slower start than I remembered. And I can probably explain that away. But I felt like as the episodes went on, as more characters were introduced and we got more acclimated to what the environment and where Star Wars was at this time, it felt like that got better and that became an easier conversation to have with people. And so that's why you saw those numbers starting to grow over time. So the trends there, low viewership, it never made the Nielsen top 10 ratings, which is kind of a metric, kind of a standard meter that you use these days to see whether or not a show is doing really well from a streaming service. Again, had lower starting numbers than Andor and Acolyte. But again, it was a very steady climb until it plateaued. And I will say this, just testimonially, like my kids loved this show. They absolutely loved it. Like I've tried to get them to watch different things in Star Wars and other like Marvel stuff. And they really don't have a huge appetite for it outside of the sequel trilogy. And even as my rewatch, so my 8-year-old, who is the pickiest person in the world, like he will not sit down and watch anything except a very small list of things that he's very comfortable watching. He had not seen this since 2024 when he was only like 6.5 years old at the time. Well, as I was watching this in the rewatch, I kept seeing him looking over. And then eventually he'd make his way to the couch and sat down with me. And he ended up watching the last 3-4 episodes, just sitting down with me watching it, which is, again, it's so rare that he would ever do that. But it was enough. It was captivating enough for him that he wanted to sit down and watch it. So from that perspective, I would say I think it was very successful, for kids. And I don't know if there's any way to truly measure that because, they're not the ones that have the credit cards or the accounts to some of these places. So anyways, those are my thoughts on it. But I guess what was your experience like, I guess, with watching it and I guess the water cooler talk that you might have had with folks as the series was progressing through the season?
So, being a hardcore fan, I was going to watch every episode regardless of how it took off or whatever. And I will admit it did start slow, but once it started to hit all those correct notes, to essentially work on the nostalgia aspect of what that show was trying to do, it just started firing on all cylinders for me anyway. But I agree with you that, I just think that there wasn't just a lot of information about this particular show. Yes, Jude Law was in it, and that was kind of the big name behind it. But, as far as like hype, there really wasn't any hype. I coined this type of Star Wars hype. I call it the Solo effect, only because the way that they marketed Solo wasn't really the best, and hence on why it didn't do as well as people thought it would. So they didn't really put the hype machine behind this show. They just focused on Jude Law, and that's about it. So I guess Disney and Lucasfilm were going to depend on word of mouth to get people to watch the show. And I think that's eventually what happened. Folks really, maybe the casual fan just didn't really have interest. There was no big name character. I think you and I mentioned this to you, for me, this show was the first Star Wars show that really didn't have a character tie back to the Skywalker saga, whereas a lot of other TV shows at, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, they had some character from the Skywalker saga. So this was the first one that didn't. And I think Lucasfilm really depended on the word of mouth to get out so that people would watch. And I think that's what happened with the viewership numbers growing week by week by week. Now, for me, it's probably after the third episode, I was glued in because, again, they started hitting all the right notes to come back with the nostalgia to keep me engaged. And I did enjoy the entire series. Was it the strongest? No, not by any means, but I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed how the story progressed. I enjoyed how certain characters grew. So for me, it was a great show. I loved it. And then, I went ahead and I rewatched the entire series over the last couple of days, and it was still a good watch. I think it has a good rewatchability. So I thought it was great. And, I think it stood the test of time from at least for a year.
Yeah, I would agree too. I wonder how much there was a lot that had been said at the time, especially even weeks and months after the series had ended. And you can still see people talking about Skeleton Crew today in these terms, but there's been a lot of talk about the impact and the effect that the Acolyte had, right? That negative reception that was received from fans, or if you want to call them fans, people that didn't like the show. I'm not saying that was the only factor. I think you've pointed out some other ones as well, but I do see a lot of people feel like, hey, that negative reception really put people off from I don't want to watch another Disney Star Wars show. Like the other one didn't really do well for me. Mm-hmm. I can see that. I can definitely see that. I think there's also talk about fatigue, mm-hmm. whether that's streaming fatigue in general or fatigue specifically around Star Wars streaming. Cause we came out of COVID hot and heavy, ready to just take on the world as far as streaming goes, right? That's what we were doing. And then we kind of pulled the reins back on that. And so some of that may have been that as well. I think it's also interesting to point out that originally Skeleton Crew was supposed to come out before The Acolyte, and they kind of pulled that switch on us sometime in 2023. They announced that Acolyte was going to be out during the summer, mm-hmm. and that Skeleton Crew was getting pushed back. And that was really surprising. And I do wonder how much better this would have fared had this come out first, and then how much better Acolyte would have fared had that come out second. But I don't know. There's not a lot of science in that, and I'm sure you could poke a lot of holes into whether or not that would be successful or not, both ways.
Yeah, they must have had some metric or something where they decided, because I believe that if they would have released Skeleton Crew in the summertime, where kids were out of school, I think more time to watch. They don't. Most households, I don't want to say most, but I know the households I've been a part of as a father and a child, over the summer, your curfew is laxed a little bit because you don't have to get up to go to school. Maybe the viewership would have been more because more kids would have been able to watch it, not have to worry about, eating dinner, doing homework, getting cleaned up for the next day, and then maybe watching it a couple of days later, or it just slips through their mind and they don't get around to watching it at all because, school life or whatnot. Skeleton Crew probably would have done better. So there must have been some type of internal metric or something that caused Lucasfilm and Disney to switch the releases between the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. But yeah, I do believe, again, we go back to that Solo effect where, I think a lot of the negativity surrounding how people felt about the Acolyte did rub off on Skeleton Crew, similar to the negativity and controversy that surrounded The Last Jedi kind of rubbed off on the success of Solo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we see it. So this isn't the first time this would have happened. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses for Skeleton Crew or any of the other series, right? But it does have an impact. It factors into it when you take into totality everything that's going on at that time. So as far as like this show itself, you and I got a chance to see it here in Austin. We got tickets to go see it was like a pre-screening, or no, it was a day of, I think.
Yeah, it was
a
day of, and it was just a theatrical presentation of the first 2 episodes.
Right. So Fandango was doing it. They handed out some posters, and I think you sat right next to us, as a matter of fact, that time went back then.
Yep, I got the poster hanging up right here.
Oh yeah, I can see it there. Yep. I didn't realize that was it.
Yep.
Yeah, I still got some over here. I got to send one to one of our Patreon members. That just reminded me. Anyways, but that was a fun experience, and I remember coming out of that experience and thinking this was really cool. Like I really enjoyed it. Too bad it wasn't a movie. Now, that said, I do want to point out too that this originally was pitched by Ford and Watts as a movie, and it was through talking with Kathleen Kennedy, and there's a whole thing about it. The history goes that they felt like, hey, this is something we could actually make into a television series. And while it was only 8 episodes, it really wasn't a huge series, and some of these episodes were like in that 25, 30 minute mark range, so it wasn't really long. There were times that as I was watching the series the first time, but I think it became more apparent for me the second time that I felt like this really could have been an incredible movie, because there's so much that they could have cut out. Not that I don't love that stuff. If you know me, then I love the context. I read Wikipedia just to be when I'm bored, right? I love all the additional stuff, even stuff that I'll never need to know. I want that, me personally. But at the same time, I am conscious and aware and can acknowledge that some things don't have to be there. They don't have to exist in order to make something better, right? For larger masses of audiences. And I felt like during the rewatch of this one, there were certain things that I was like, oh, you could have just cut that, or you could have just went from here to here, and that would have been much more accelerating. The pacing would have been faster, higher, right? And so I can kind of see like the vision of it being in a movie, I think makes absolute and total sense, and even sequels beyond that if you really wanted to, right? But I think, again, you got to go back to where we were when this was pitched. And what were they trying to do? They were trying to get more streaming services out there, more streaming programming out there. And so if this was an opportunity, and even if it was like, okay, we can extend this to 8 episodes, great. Where do we sign kind of thing? Let's get it going. Let's get the 8 episodes out there. And so I think some of that did play into that for some viewers, because I can understand where it does have its peaks and valleys. I think there's more highs and lows with this series, but it definitely wasn't something that was keeping me engrossed and engaged the entire time. As lovable as the characters were, as incredible of a job that all the kid actors did, the adult actors did, the special effects, the practical effects. I mean, it had everything you would want in a Star Wars movie, Star Wars television series, but still it wasn't perfect throughout all of it. Now, so those are my thoughts, I guess, watching it. I will say too, like, there is something, they were going after the Goonies in space, and they were going after the Amblin effect. Having grown up in that area, I feel like they did. I said this when we did our reviews. It totally hit the mark on that stuff. There were moments in there that felt very nostalgic, as though I was watching something circa 1985, right? Or a movie or something. There was just something about the music and the kids and the whimsical exploration and some of the comedy bits. All of that, like, they ticked all the boxes that you would want on that. So for as older audiences, it was very, accessible to us. And even to the younger audiences, I think that was the case too. But yeah, I guess in the end, it wasn't enough to keep it to enough for it to skyrocket into the top 10 of like a Nielsen ratings, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree. Also, again, there was just not much hype around this. You know what I mean? Yeah, they did have we did attend the theatrical screening of the first 2 episodes. But other than that, I mean, I don't recall any big like media push, big a lot of the commercials on ABC networks. I don't remember that. It's kind of like they said, hey, we got this coming, and they kind of left it at that. Because, this show, when it comes to hitting, I mentioned this too, that, when it started getting into that nostalgic vibe, it started checking all the boxes for me, like, you just said. But they had the perfect opportunity to increase viewership, because not only were us Gen X guys are people that were raised with Amblin, raised with Goonies, raised with E.T., raised with Star Wars, we were going to fall in love with this because, it hit all those buttons for us. But, I mentioned this to you, kids like to watch kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kids like to watch kids. So they had the perfect opportunity to like burn the candle at both ends. And I just believe because of the way that they marketed this show, they didn't take advantage of that. And that's unfortunate because, you know, believe it or not, kids and what they want as far as like media and toys and whatnot, that generates a lot of money and that could generate a lot of viewership. And, you know, again, I don't believe Disney really marketed this show, and it's unfortunate because I think it is a good show. It is a viable show. It is like I said, I don't think it's one of the stronger shows, but you know, I would put it up there above Acolyte. And I actually liked Acolyte. My issue with Acolyte had nothing to do with the characters, the story. It's just the way the story was told for me was just too disjointed. And so, you know, that's why I kind of put Acolyte down at the bottom. But I would actually, you know, if I had an opportunity to watch, you know, one or the other, I would watch Skeleton Crew.
Yeah. No, and it's a good show. Like there's no mistake about it. It was a lot of fun to rewatch. I found myself laughing.
Mm-hmm.
There was things that, you know, that I really remembered or didn't remember, but when it happened, I'm like, wow, I totally forgot about that. And it's a great moment or a great scene or a great dialogue. A lot of one-liners. I thought Jude Law, again, I said this when we were doing the reviews and the breakdowns, but I'm not going to say I wasn't a huge fan of Jude Law. I just hadn't really seen a lot of movies with him or a lot of things with him in past, but I was like completely turned around. I'm like, this guy is great. Like he is so perfect as Jod, and thought he killed it, nailed it. So yeah, I mean, it did have a lot going for it. One other thing before we kind of get into maybe some of our favorite moments or things that kind of hit harder or stood out during our rewatch. As I was watching this, I couldn't help but wonder, you know, I was thinking about the movie versus the TV series. And then after thinking about the TV series, it kind of led into, all right, well, could this have been a show that would have been more successful had they released it all at once? You know, we've had this conversation. We've talked about all the Star Wars series so far about this and whether or not it makes sense. And you know, there's reasons why they do a week to week, both from a viewership perspective, from, you know, a numbers thing, you know, there's money tied to that. They've got all their little stats and I totally understand it. And some of that stuff is, you know, we'll never know exactly some of the logic or the algorithms that go into determining whether or not something is released at once versus, you know, week by week. But I do feel like this series now in retrospective, and this might be a different opinion than I had after watching it the first time, but I feel like this probably could have done better had they released it all at once rather than the week to week, because it's not, for me, it doesn't feel like you really get into the groove of things until you get till about episode 4. It's great they released. Yeah. I mean, it's great they released the first 2 episodes because that would have been blunderous. Like, I don't know that anybody would in this day and age, it's so easy to lose people so quickly. So releasing 1 episode and waiting a week, I don't think that would have worked for the series. Right. But releasing 4 episodes, I think would have worked better than releasing, you know, 2 and then 1 after each week. Releasing all of them at once, I don't know. I have a feeling like this might have bode well for them had they done that. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So we kind of had a little small conversation about this, but look at the other streaming show that is compared to Skeleton Crew, and that's Stranger Things. Stranger Things, for every season, with the exception of this last one, they released all the episodes at once. So, and because it had the same, it followed the same step. It had the same vibe. It had the same cadence. The first season of in my opinion, first season of Stranger Things and then Skeleton Crew, it followed the same cadence. It started off slow, but then it picked up around episode 3 or 4. And then, but see, the thing is, then you could keep going because they released all the episodes at once. So I completely agree with you because of the way that this show is structured and the audience that it's trying to get. I think it would have been very advantageous for them just to release it all at once. And then that way folks would stay engaged because, you know, they wouldn't have, if something was slow and they wouldn't have to wait a week to continue to say, okay, let me see if this picks up. And that's where you lose viewership.
Lose interest.
Yeah, you lose interest, you lose viewership.
Momentum.
Exactly. Or you don't probably, you know, do away with it, but you don't make it a priority to catch the episode when it debuts. And then, you know, we just talked about it at the beginning of the show. Life gets in the way, and you unprioritize watching the show, and then ultimately, that's where shows get dropped. So yeah, I firmly believe that this particular show, maybe not Mandalorian, maybe not Ahsoka, shows like that, but this particular show would have benefited if they just released it all at once. And again, they could have taken some advice or taken some ideas from how the Duffer Brothers did Stranger Things. Like I said, with the exception of this last season, they released all the other seasons all at once on the day that it debuted.
Yeah. And I remember, I'm a massive Stranger Things fan. I know you are as well. But as I was watching those series, sitting down when Stranger Things every season came out, it was not uncommon like this. And it's very uncommon for me just in general. Right. But when those series came out, like I would actually sit down, carve out time to watch 4, 5, even 6 episodes at once. Mm-hmm. And I never do that with anything else. Right. So I'm locked in for like a 3-4 hour block. Right. Mm-hmm. With this series, because some of these episodes weren't full 1 hour episodes, they were in that 30-minute and sometimes 43-minute mark. You could have easily squeezed in 4 or 5 episodes in what would be a normal block of time that most people, I think, would sit down and say, we're going to just binge watch this tonight. Right.
Exactly.
So I think that would have done really well. And that would have got them hooked and really got people talking about, Skeleton Crew in a different light, because they would have gotten to that 4th and 5th episode when, you've got more of the main characters in there and things are really starting to pick up, and you got the storyline and all of the intrigue about what's really happening that's when it starts picking up. And I think that's what hooks you into it, is like, where is this going to go? Where are they? What are they doing? Who's who? that sort of thing. That's what really starts driving it. And I think from releasing them all at once definitely would have helped capture a lot of that.
Yeah. I think just Disney is used to this, because I don't know if this is 100% true, but from my recollection with The Mandalorian, Disney was the one that started this. Okay, we're going to release on a streaming platform 1 episode a week. I want to say that before that, when it was Netflix, before, Netflix was the primary streaming platform for, streaming television shows, I think the norm was to release them all at once. And then Disney shows up with The Mandalorian, and they introduce this, just either 1 episode or maybe 1 or 2 episodes a week for the show when it, when a new show debuts. So, I mean, if this is their cadence, it's very, I don't see Disney, especially with live action stuff, get off that cadence. And that's, I don't know if it's because, like you said, it could be because of a monetary issue, or it could just be because that's how they want to, run their streaming business. I think the only other Star Wars properties on Disney Plus that actually are released all at once were Visions, and I think the Young Jedi animated series. But everything else, even like Bad Batch and all those animated shows, they had 1 episode a week as well. So I think it's just their cadence and their reluctance to change.
I think so too. And I think Tales of the whatever, I think they did those all at once as well.
Oh yeah. Tales from whatever, the Tales of the Jedi. Those
are so short. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking like 10, 12 minutes. So I think it, makes sense that they would do that on those particular ones. I think some of it, and I know I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I think some of it goes back to, we got to remember Disney owns ABC. Mm-hmm. And that is traditional television where they do release once a week. That has always been the case for, tens and tens of years, mm-hmm. or whatever, 50 years now of television. So I think for them, it probably felt more comfortable, even though Netflix was kind of the maverick coming in and saying, oh, we're going to release everything all at one time. Right. And all the major broadcast companies were like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is not what you do with television series. And Netflix showed them that there is another way to do it.
Right.
I don't think everybody bought into that. And I think what they were leaning on, what they were banking on, was that this water cooler talk, right? If we release 2 episodes that'll get people talking, get them excited, they're going to go hit, social media and come up with theories, and people are going to be doing this and that. And then by the time we get to the 2nd episode, we're going to turn things around and introduce more stuff to them. And that'll get them talking, right? It's just this machine of hype that builds and continues to build over the course of a season. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that this series had that because it took too long to get to that point.
Right.
I think that's why so many television series fail in this day and age, because people don't have the attention span. They don't want to invest into a 6 to 8 week period for a television series when they could go watch something on Netflix and within the first couple of hours feel like this is something they want to spend their time doing. And I understand that.
Right.
I respect it.
Mhm.
Right. But it does kind of suck because there are a lot of good shows that are out there. I'm not even talking about Skeleton Crew that never see the light of day after 3 or 4 episodes because the ratings are so low.
Right.
And that's just unfortunate. So,
and another thing too, that probably, doesn't help viewership is there are a lot of people who, because of the streaming explosion that happened over the pandemic and with Netflix leading the charge then of releasing their shows and their episodes all at once, what they'll do is if there's a show that they're interested in seeing, but it's going to be a week to week release, they won't watch it. They'll wait the weeks, if it's a 10 episode series, they'll wait 10 weeks until all the episodes are released and then watch it all at once. Well, again, what I've said many times before, life gets in the way and, maybe, they had high expectations for a show and then, they wait for all the episodes to be released and then they forget or something happens and they never end up watching that show, or they end up watching the show when, the show's fate is already decided, it's
too late.
It's too late at that point. So I don't really, would I prefer all the episodes to be released all at once? Yes. Cause I'm probably getting to that point where I lose the ability to focus on something. And if something is just slow and just not pulling me in, I'll probably let it go. So I would prefer that they would release them all at once, but I understand. And actually now with what Disney, the tradition that Disney has started with releasing, shows weekly, even Netflix has changed its tune and they're releasing.
They're starting
to do that as well. So I think that's just going to be the norm moving forward. Yeah,
no, I agree. Well, let's kind of focus on. I know that, like I said, we probably spent more time than I wanted to on that, but there's a good conversation. I think we've highlighted some of the potential reasons as to why the viewership was low, and certainly focused on, I wouldn't say the negative, but stuff that was fair criticism.
Right.
What stood out for you though from the positives as you were rewatching this? What were some of the moments? We did like a from a certain point of view, top 3 moments and all that. Mm-hmm. So I think people have already heard mine, and I'll chime in on a couple of things, but I'm interested to hear from you. Like, what were some of the standout moments and things that really caught your eye watching this a second time, or the next time, however many times you've seen it since then?
So I guess a lot of the moments that really caught my eyes revolved around the kids, and because I could relate to, there was something that as me growing up, I could relate to all of the characters that were there. You had Neil, Wim, KB, and Fern. I had. When I was growing up, I had traits like all of them had, KB being the smart one, Wim being the imaginative one, and then Neil being maybe a little bit of a coward, and then Fern being the firm one, the one trying to take charge. I had a little bit of all those, but like I don't think I could name 3 moments, but the one moment that I remember most of this show it's actually the finale, where Wim, they leave the tower where the supervisor's busted, and they're going to they go and they save KB and they save 33, and then he runs to look through like a cracked opening in the building, and like wind's blowing through his hair, and he smiles because he sees the X-wings fly by, and that's how he knows there's another world out there, and he potentially will have an opportunity to have more adventures. I think that one kind of for not just nostalgic reasons, but just, being that kid who, growing up in Austin, Texas, where back then in the 80s, not much happened. And, I always dreamed of being in a bigger city where more fun things were available, just wanting to see what's out there. That kind of hit me when I saw that, for not just the first time, but actually this when I rewatched it here the last few days. I think that's the one scene that kind of will always stay with me for Skeleton Crew.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great moment. The music's perfect. Mm-hmm. Michael Giacchino does the music for the soundtrack, which I want to just briefly touch on here in a second. The music's playing. It's very inspirational. It's very much like maybe a look into a glimpse into the future of things to come with these characters, or maybe the show. And I think that's why they threw it in there. this, I've already talked about it. It definitely had the Amblin effect for me.
Mhm.
You know, it had the ET moments. There were moments in there, plenty of moments that were very similar to like the Goonies. It had some member berries for like Star Wars, even though there wasn't anything explicitly Star
Mhm.
Wars. You know, as far as like callbacks to like Jedi anyway. There were other things in there that were, you know, maybe think of, you know, the ship not starting up the right way sometimes, or you know, some of the one-liners that they had were very, very similar. Jod's intro when he first comes in, if this is a whatever ship, then where is your something, right? It was
Mhm.
very reminiscent of, if this is a counselor ship, where's the ambassador,
Right.
right? It was just moments like that they did that. And just speaking of the soundtrack quickly, there were several moments in this, and I meant to mark down the times and try to find the songs, and I just didn't. I ran out of time. I didn't get a chance to do it, but Michael Giacchino does a really cool job, a really interesting and unique thing with the soundtrack where he plays certain notes that are almost going to play like note progressions that you would expect from the main theme of Star Wars, but he changes it.
Mhm.
So like you hear the first two notes and you're like, oh, this is the Star Wars theme or the main theme. And he changes the note on you, that third note, and it's not.
Right.
And he just plays with you. He just toys with your mind, thinking that he's about to go into a particular song that you know and love from John Williams soundtrack. And it's not, he's changed it up a little bit. That has got to be 100% purposeful. And there's got to be an intent in that. I love that he does that. I've always been a huge fan of his work ever since he did stuff on Lost. I think he's an amazing composer. But I do just while we're still talking about this, as one of the standout things, I do want to talk about the music more, because this was, you know, who would have thought that after the Force Awakens that you know, we would be talking about music composers doing Star Wars work and not be talking about John Williams. You know, like in my mind, I never thought anybody would ever be able to do music that would capture me, inspire me the way John Williams. And don't get me wrong, he's the maestro. No one's at that level right now. There's been some pieces in there and there's certain movements and certain parts with some of the soundtracks that others have done that are like really, really, really good, but they haven't reached that level. But at the same time, if you would have told me we would have had other composers coming in doing music that doesn't sound like John Williams, right?
Mhm.
And still be impactful and still make it feel like Star Wars, I would have told you you're crazy. And yet this was a good example of this particular soundtrack captured a lot of those moments of Williams's soundtrack from like E.T. or some of the stuff that I forget that who did the Goonies soundtrack, but like some of the Alan Silvestri music, or there's some who's the other guy? There was another big composer at that time that was doing a lot of this stuff, but yeah, I mean, there was just moments in there where I felt like, again, given all the ambience and all the stuff that was going on, and you know, visually from an Amblin perspective, you still had that music in the background that was just kind of breathing life into Star Wars in a way that, you know, was unexpected at times and certainly appreciated, because I really did love this soundtrack. And I was actually listening today while I was working. As I was working, I just had it going in the background. There's some really good pieces in this that stood out.
Yeah, no, I agree. What I noticed about the soundtrack is it was very similar. Not the music, you know, note for note, but the boisterous way that the music would flow. It was very reminiscent of like E.T. It was reminiscent of like the Goonies, when, you know, they're riding their bikes down the road and they had like this boisterous soundtrack behind them, or, you know, they're getting ready to board One-Eyed Willie's, you know, pirate ship, or when, you know, when the bikes take off, when E.T. does his thing and the bikes take off, you know, they had that very boisterous soundtrack behind it. That's what I noticed. And that was another thing that kind of hit the nostalgia factor for me, because those musical cues are nostalgic for me as well, because I can relate, you know, to you know, E.T. and the Goonies and Monster Squads, movies like that. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that the soundtrack did to me. And I know you mentioned his name. I don't the guy who actually was responsible for the soundtrack for
Michael Giacchino.
Michael Giacchino. He did a great job just capturing those moments. And I think I know the scene that you were talking about is where, you know, they first encounter Jod, and he pulls the key, and it plays like the first like 4 notes of the Force theme, and then boom, it goes into something else. It stops.
Yeah, it goes into something else. Like, wait a second.
Yeah, the person who gosh, it escapes my mind. The composer of the soundtrack for Rogue One, he did that in several places with John Williams music. I think the most notable one that I remembered is when the Tantive 4 escapes Darth Vader, and it starts to play like the first three notes of the Imperial March, then it goes into something completely different. So, he did that as well, and I think that's just homage to the greatness of John Williams and his music.
Yeah, it was Michael Giacchino that did the Rogue One soundtrack as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and he did like he's done a couple other ones as well. But he's good friends with what's his face, J.J. Abrams. So that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think that's kind of his signature. But you got Ludwig Garrison, the guy doing the Mando stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, he killed it. It's just so good, right?
Yeah.
So
he was able to bring like a Western-ish aspect to the soundtrack for The Mandalorian, but it still felt like Star Wars, and he did pull in, where appropriate, the John Williams music to do did similar to what Keanu did with Skeleton Crew and Rogue One. So I think that was what he did. He's also a genius, and his music his soundtrack is amazing.
Was there anything that didn't work for you, given that maybe overlooked or stood out as a sore thumb? And then what worked for you? Like, what were some of the things that definitely worked for you?
So what kind of didn't work for me was the fact that they kind of really pushed the suburban space community a little bit too much. I thought that was a little bit drawn out. You talked earlier about stuff that could be cut to kind of, make it a little bit more streamlined, or like, we talked about making it into a movie. I thought a lot of that suburban type of scenes that really filled the first two episodes, that could have been shrunk down a little bit. That kind of, it didn't annoy me, but I just thought it wasn't necessary. So it kind of stuck out like a sore thumb for me. And then, you
feel like,
go ahead.
Well, I got a question. I want to follow up on that one. So do you feel, and I'm curious because we talked a lot about this when the first couple episodes came out, especially after all of the discourse that was going back and forth when we got the trailers. People were like, this is not Star Wars. This looks like, E.T. It looks like the United States circa 1983. And I totally understand the feedback. And part of me feels the same way. Like, okay, I mean, I'm really conflicted here because one part of me feels like I love the way it looks, and it feels like home in a lot of ways for nostalgia purposes. At the same time, is it practical from a Star Wars perspective? And I know you can explain different ways as to why the society would be built that way from a Star Wars thing and not sound like you're an apologist. But at the same time, I do understand the criticism and certainly the feedback. Did it ever feel like this was treading too closely to real life, where Star Wars needs to have that, the alien part of it, right? We need to subvert expectations so much that it's not recognizable yet still feels welcoming, kind of thing.
No, I don't think it wasn't like that. That particular part of the show shouldn't be there because it's not Star Wars. I just thought they tried to hit us over the head with the fact that they tried to make it like typical suburban living that we live in, or that's here on Earth right now. Like real life, I should say. No, but like a lot. Even though it's a more technologically advanced society, that looked like the house I grew up in the 80s. How things were positioned and like where your dining room table was. It was all like that. I just thought they just tried to hit you over the head with it too hard. And as far as like, does a society like that belong in Star Wars? Absolutely. I mean, look at the societies we have here on this planet right now on Earth. There are suburban neighborhoods like that all over this country. But then you might go to another country and there is a community that looks more like Tatooine. Then you go to your big city, Tokyo, looks like Coruscant. So no, I mean, I don't have a problem with that because, different communities exist. And if the Star Wars universe is supposed to be vast and huge with all these types of communities and aliens and whatnot, why not have a suburban community? I don't have an issue with that. The issue that I had is that they tried to, like I said, beat you over the head to say, hey, oh, this is just like what you grew up in, So that's what kind of annoyed me about that. But no, that it existed, absolutely not.
And that touches on something that when we get to kind of our final thoughts, it touches on something for me that is really the only big negative takeaway. Because I think by and large, I enjoyed the series when it came out. I enjoyed my rewatch. I mean, sitting there watching it with Luke was just the best thing in the world. So I don't have a lot of negative complaints about it. I mean, I can acknowledge that again, things were the pacing was a little slow and wonky at times. But for the most part, once you get into like that fourth episode, from that point on, the last four episodes are just perfect in just about every way. Like you have a lot of emotions flaring. There's stuff that's really comedic and funny. You've got moments in there where you start to kind of open your heart up to Jod because he's going in saying all he really wants is the kids. And you think, oh, he's got a golden heart kind of thing, and even though he's rough on the outside. And really, no, that turns out to not be the case, right? He does turn out to be kind of like the bad guy, but it does play with your emotions there. I felt like that very end where he's really yelling at the kids and you can see Wim crying. That's a really powerful moment in there because it's so uncharacteristic of what we had seen at that point. And the way the actors, the kids react to that seems very genuine. So, I mean, credit to a lot of what they were trying to do with, there's a lot of themes around like parenthood and, coming of age and growing up and that sort of thing. I mean, they play with that all deftly. I think it's a really good, if you go back and really watch it from that lens, they do a great job with all of that. So I didn't leave the first watch last year with any hard negative feelings about the series. And I don't feel like I've got any going, into this next year here after watching it again. Like, I feel like it just did really well. I feel like over time, this series may work out, but we'll table that because I do want to get into just one quick thing here. I do want to quickly just mention that it does have a number of awards that it is up for. Now, it's not up for anything like, the national Emmys or anything like that, but it was nominated and this is not the full list, by the way, but the 2025 Kid Choice Awards. It got nominated for favorite family TV show, favorite male TV star. That's Jude Law, and then female was Ryan Kiera Armstrong. So all three of them got nominated. They didn't win any of those. But coming up here, first off, on March 1st, we have the Children's and Family Emmys. So this is like the Emmys, the big one for television, but it's just for like the family stuff, right? And so for that one, it's got a ton of them. It's got Jude Law, Ravi Cobbett Conyers, Ford and Watts for writing, and then just a ton of other like technical awards. So I suspect it's probably going to win something from that, given the number of nominations it has. And then after that, this was just announced a couple of days ago, maybe I think it was last week, the 2026 Saturn Awards come out on March 8th. And that it was nominated for was Best New Genre Television Series, Best Supporting Actor in a Television Series by Jude Law, and Best Young Performer in a Television Series for Ravi Cobbett Conyers. So it's got, it's got some at least some nominations, some recognition of the series and how well it does. So that is going to be coming up here soon. So take a look at that. Hopefully it does win something because I think it's deserving of some of it, especially Ravi. He's a great guy on Instagram. I follow him on there. He was really like every time we posted anything, he was sitting there liking and commenting and, he's just a kid, but it's still cool that he was seeing this stuff and he really is a Star Wars fan. Yeah. So I'm really rooting for him. I hope he does get something, take home some trophy or some hardware there from that.
No, I agree. I think all of these nominations that the show received were absolutely deserved. And I do think that they're going to pull a win out with one of these nominations coming up for the Family Emmys and then the Saturn Awards because it is deserving. I think technically and how the movie looks, I think it's beautiful. I think it's up there with, the Disney Plus shows, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, whatnot. It's up there with how great it looks. I think it looks absolutely beautiful. And then you talked about Jude Law and the children actors. Yeah, I think for the content and what this show was about, I thought they knocked it out of the park from an acting perspective. The children and Jude Law, he came in and he played the Jod character to a T, from being deceptive to being ruthless to at the end. We talked about he actually softened up a bit because he was talking about how the Jedi discovered him, and then during Order 66, they made him watch them massacre his master. And that was that you could tell he had some sorrow behind that. So I thought he did a great job. I thought the kids did a great job. Ravi, especially, I thought he did a great job. So yeah, the nominations are well deserved, but they also deserve some wins there for those awards.
Okay, so and I guess this is really where it comes down to is, this 1 year later format is really to kind of talk about how do we feel after a year and, what the series is going to look like over time. So I'll just start here. I think, in my opinion, I feel like this series will get better over time. Some of that is I think it'll grow on people because I don't think people gave it a fair shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think if people actually went back and sat down and watched this and committed some time to get to episode 4 and 5, and I get it, you don't have to. I mean, I've always heard that argument. I shouldn't have to watch a whole series to really like it. Okay, fine, whatever. You don't have to, right? I get it. You're busy, but I think you would benefit from actually sitting down and watching this if you have not had a chance to watch it. It's definitely worth taking a second look at, or giving it a second try. So I think that over time, I think it will age well from that perspective. But I think the one thing that's probably going to accelerate that is going to be whether or not we get anything from this series, because this is my only takeaway, my only negative. And I had this after the first, last year when we saw it. I certainly walked away with it again here. There were a lot of things that on the surface probably weren't important and didn't need to be explained. But with a series like this, especially given the way things turned out with them being this isolated planet in the middle of, quote, present time and still working as though they were in the old republic of things, right? A lot of the way that the mechanisms and the way their formats and processes worked felt very are draconic from a Star Wars perspective. Yet they were still aware that Order 66 had happened, that the Jedi had been eliminated. You could say, okay, they were aware of that, or maybe there was another purge that happened a long time ago during the Old Republic. And that's they've got information from that as well. There was just a lot of unknowns, especially when you talk about like, why did Ad-Atlan even exist?
Mm-hmm.
Why did they come up with that, right? Why did they have a central place for currency? And we've talked about all kinds of speculation and theories as to why this is the case. But I think the one big question that still needs to be, that I walked away being unanswered, was what happens now? You have a galaxy that's being run by the Resistance, or I guess the New Republic at this point, not necessarily the Resistance, but the New Republic is running this. And they've just come into a wealth of cash, a wealth of wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have so many of these credits now. I mean, he said there's 1,139 more vaults, right? Just one more than 1138, which is, a holy number in Star Wars. But there's so much more gold on this particular planet. And now you've got that the New Republic coming in, they've got it. So what do they do with that? What happens to all of that? How do they explain all of this stuff? What kind of an impact does something like At-Alden, or what's the name of the planet now? At-Aten.
Mm-hmm.
Can't say I heard about At-Aten. Like what happens? What kind of an impact does that have? And I'm kind of joking, but I'm not. But how does that impact the economic system of the galaxy now that you've just put a ton of new, wealth into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
For good or bad. So there's a lot that needs to be explained. I definitely am super intrigued, and I want to see these characters come back, whether it's going to be a season 2 or maybe they flash forward and we catch up with them in their teenage years. And Wim is now, an aspiring pilot, and they've all kind of gone their different ways now or something. I'd love to see that. But this series did end, and it felt like it wasn't necessarily one and done, especially when you got Jod, who just kind of, disappears,
right,
and he's not caught, right? So he's still out there as well. So they left a lot of loose ends here. There's a lot of questions that went unanswered, and the way things just kind of wrapped up was super exciting. And there was a lot of momentum in that, but we never went back and touched on a lot of things as well. So for me, just a purely Star Wars kind of appreciation, definitely loved all of that. But now I've got a lot more answers about what's going to happen. So I don't know. I think where I was going with all that, sorry, before I got on a long tirade, was I think if we get answers to some of that stuff and we get to see these characters later on,
mm-hmm.
I think that does bode well for, how well people are going to receive this series in the future, if there's something there.
Right.
If they never come back to this, I don't know that it's going to have enough for people to go back, 5 years from now when there's like 10 more Disney Plus series. What's going to make someone go, I'm going to watch that Skeleton Crew series rather than, all the other stuff that's already
mm-hmm.
out there that, potentially could be doing better.
Yeah, I agree with you. However, I just based off the history of Disney Plus and the Star Wars television shows, as far as a series on its own or a season 2, I don't foresee that happening. Now, I do think we may get some stories, continuation stories in other media, like books or comic books or something of that nature. But just based off Disney's recent history with Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, because of how this performed, and because even though it is a good series, and I think overall the word of mouth now for this series is positive, I don't think we're going to get anything, which is a shame. Now, the one caveat to that is I do know. Well, when this show was first announced, they said, "Hey, it's part of the Mandoverse."
Right.
You know what I mean? And then, years ago, it was announced that, hey, all of the Mandoverse characters and shows are going to combine, and essentially they're going to have their doomsday, or I'm sorry, their endgame moment, and all come to fight a singular threat, and that Skeleton Crew was going to be a part of it.
Right.
So will we see something about that maybe at Aten in itself, because it's holding a wealth of, it's essentially a galactic Fort Knox at this point, will it play in whatever that comes? But then I think it was a week ago, they said that as will that, Filoni-verse or Mando-verse movie be a movie, or will it be a TV series, or will it even happen at all? That's all up in the air now, at least based off the rumors that I've read. So I don't know, but I unfortunately, I just don't think we're going to get a standalone series to continue this story, or like a season 2 of Skeleton Crew. I think if we get anything in movies or TV show, it'll be whatever that Mando / Filoni-verse finale movie will be, and we might see the characters then. But if there's going to, if there is going to be a fleshing out or a continuation of this particular story, we'll probably see it in a novel or a comic book. That's just what I think, based off Disney's history.
And you're right on topic, because we've been talking about this big event, is what I think how it was labeled back in 2020. Was it D20? I can't remember where it was. They announced that all these were going to come together.
I think it was Celebration 2022 in Anaheim.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, I mean, it was supposed to be Rangers of the New Republic and this one and Mando and potentially some other series, and that, Ahsoka was going to play into it as well. And so when you start kind of putting the pieces together, you're thinking, oh, we're building up to like Heir to the Empire here,
right?
Or some
exactly
variation of Heir to the Empire, because Thrawn is really the only baddie that we know still out there, and has all the potential to come back and really be a thorn in the side of the New Republic. So I think we were kind of leaning that way. But to your point, yeah, there's been a lot of rumors here recently about that may not be the case, especially now with Filoni going into his new position, and they want to see how things go before they commit to whether or not they're going to do a series versus a number of movies. And I get it. I mean, it totally makes sense. But I'm with you. Like, I'd rather see this as part of that bigger. I still want to see that. I want to see them have their end game moment. I want to see all these series come together in that kind of a Marvel moment. I'd love to see it, honestly. So that'd be my preference. But if they didn't go that route, or they needed to buy some time, then maybe they do come out with like a season 2. But I don't know that would be happening either. Like, I'd love to have it. I just don't think it's realistically going to happen. In the comments, RX Fantamos says, that's Alex, need season 2. They left a great cast of characters they can plug in and play into any later stories. So similar to what we talked about. And then My Star Wars Guys said, I think the show in particular would benefit from being aired on mainstream television. There are thousands, I'd say millions, but thousands of children that come from low-income households that can't afford Disney Plus. Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the business side of Disney, but it feels like if they really wanted to expand their audiences and, cast a wider net, proverbially, I would say, yeah, this would be a series that would be prime, no pun intended, to be put on like ABC or any one of the other affiliates or channels that they get, that they're out there for free or for lower money, that maybe just come through normal cable television.
I want to say that when the series ended, they showed like the first 3 or 4 episodes on the Disney Channel or the Disney XD. But then again, that's a cable channel. So, you talk about like lower income folks, a lot of them, they may or may not have cable. So I think that would be a good place to go is to actually have it run on like The Wonderful World of Disney or something, maybe, have it run there, it'd be quick and easy programming. But I'm not sure. I actually kind of gave up on trying to predict like where Disney's going with certain things, because the history that they've had since they've had the Star Wars IP has been so inconsistent. So I try not to, rack my brain on trying to forecast how their media is going to come out. So I don't know if we'll ever see that happen again. My gut says we won't get a season 2. If we see these characters again, it's going to be in that Filoni-verse, Mando-verse finale movie or a TV series, however they decide to go. Series. Yeah.
Yep. And, to kind of close this out, I mean, I think it's certainly relevant given that we've got, new leadership at Disney. We've got new leadership at Lucasfilm. It's really difficult to predict anything right now because a lot of that could change. It's going to be very fluid, I think, over the next year until things kind of settle in. It's going to be interesting to see where they go,
right,
and how they approach this. But yeah, I mean, anything's up for grabs, and everything can be shut down too.
Exactly.
Just don't know at this point.
I mean,
so
really,
too much change.
Yeah, we just have 4 projects that I think are safe to say that we're going to get with Mando and Grogu, with Ahsoka season 2, with the Ninth Jedi Vision spinoff, and then with Starfighter. I think anything outside of that is still up in the air.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I doubt anybody's listening to this podcast or watching this YouTube video right now and hasn't seen Skeleton Crew. But I would say if you haven't, or you were hesitant, or you were put off by the initial maybe reviews or talk, and you're a Star Wars fan, I definitely go watch it. Like it's worth watching and sitting down and spending the time. Like make no mistake about it. It definitely is worth watching. So had a great time watching it again.
Yeah. And I would add to that if you grew up in the 80s, if you're a Gen X person and you grew up in the 80s, you grew up with movies like Lord of the Flies and Goonies and E.T. and, movies, Back to the Future, movies like that, watch it. You'll enjoy it, even if you're just a casual fan. And then another thing, if you're trying to introduce your children to the world of Star Wars, and they're maybe in that, 6 to 8, 9 age range, Skeleton Crew would be a perfect introduction to the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is. I mean, it's not super heavy like on the Jedi portion of it, but it definitely has the spirit of Star Wars, and that's something you want to hook them on.
Right. So, and like, I said at the beginning, kids love to watch kids. And, they can envision themselves, going out there on an adventure. And, like I said, it'd be perfect for a young child to, introduce them to the world of Star Wars. Then once they get comfortable in the universe, you can bring them up to like Empire Strikes Back and stuff like that.
Yeah. Or Andor.
Andor.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh.
Hey, kids, we're going to jump right into Andor. And probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. So thank you first off for everybody that joined us on the live stream tonight. Alex, Rob, One Up versus CPU. Thank you guys for chiming in. Certainly for your comments. Definitely appreciate y'all doing that. Want to also plug again, Lauren has her full review of Low Red Moon by Mike Chen. This is the Star Wars Outlaws novel. So even if you haven't played the game, like she has not, I think it's worth going out and watching her video of doing that. And then this Sunday, we'll be back to do part 2 of our prequels and sequels, The Final Hype, talk about all the hype that went into the sequels, how it differed from the prequels. And then at the very end, we'll come to some sort of determination about whether or not we felt like the sequels had more hype or the prequels had more hype. And your mileage may vary depending on where you were and how old you are and
where you were.
Up. But
yep.
Yeah. Well, we've got some thoughts on that. So that'll be Sunday night. It'll be a Patreon exclusive. That'll be 9 p.m. Central for that show. So, okay. Before we get out of here, Chris, any final thoughts, comments?
No, it's just that, I think that the Skeleton Crew is a very viable, very good entry into the Star Wars universe, into the Disney Plus catalog of Star Wars content. So like we said, just a minute ago, if you haven't catched it, or if you know someone that is maybe just a casual fan or a fan of, adventure movies from the 80s, to have them take a look. I mean, the more eyes that we can get on this, the better chance that we may have of getting some more actual visual media, movie or TV show with these characters.
We'll leave it there, man. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you guys here on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.